Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is the latest of Nelson Chamisa's posting on X. Gone are the biblical verses, and so too is the hashtag God is in it. In his latest posting, Chamisa is sufficiently humble to consider himself as a normal human being like you and me. In this one, he says, the Zimbabwe we want, with a little Zimbabwe flag. Zimbabwe is ours. It belongs to us all, not to a few. Zimbabwe is neither party nor personal property. This jewel is God's gift to us all. We, the people, are God's stewards of this jewel. We cannot fold our hands while it fades. Zimbabwe is too precious to be left dying and decaying. Zimbabwe must shine. Come, let's reason together. Hashtag one people. Well, there is the Chamisa, sufficiently quaffed and humbled. Gone are the over-the-top biblical verses. Hashtag God is in it. He even claimed that he was God's anointed. All that is gone now. Now we can deal with a real man, a mere mortal like you and me. And as a mere mortal, we can now hold him to account. I'm glad to hear him inviting, come, let us reason together. Yes, we want to reason together. And what better place to start than for him to admit that MDC Triple C guys have sold out this last 25 years, including the 5 years in the GNU, when they had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms which would have ended the ZANU-PF dictatorship. It must be said, Chamisa and company failed to implement even one token reform in that period. He owes the people of Zimbabwe an explanation why. They failed to implement even one token reform during the GNU, although the primary purpose of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms which would have ended the ZANU-PF dictatorship, stopped the regime rigging elections, which is the case of the country. He must also explain why post the GNU, he and his MDC friends gave up on implementing democratic reforms and settled for participating in flawed elections for a share of the spoils of power. That is exactly what happened here. I've often quoted the passages from David Coulthard's book, in which Coulthard admits that they've been participating in flawed elections out of greed. Nelson Chamisa himself has got to admit to the people of Zimbabwe that he has been participating in flawed elections out of greed. He has been lying to the people of Zimbabwe to con them to participate in flawed elections. I've often played this video clip, but it's worth playing again and again.
Makorokoto Zimbabwe nokuti hakuna munhu anomira kana denga raronga plan. Denga raronga plan, denga harifo iri. Plan ya Mwari haifo iri. Ini ndatanga kugadzira cabinet. There is no way we are not going to form a new cabinet. There is no way we are not going to have a celebration. There is no way we are not going to have an inauguration. Let's start preparing for our inauguration. Let's start preparing for our celebration.
He owes the people of Zimbabwe an apology because he, of all people, knows that that was a lie. He was lying. He assured the people of Zimbabwe that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes, knowing fully well that that was a lie. He had not done any such thing. We need to be honest. We need politicians to speak the truth. This was not just a lie. This was a serious lie. Because he deliberately conned people to participate in a flawed elections, knowing fully well that ZANU-PF was rigging, knowing fully well that the consequences of participating was to give ZANU-PF legitimacy and perpetuate the people's suffering. That is treason. He cannot continue to pretend that he did nothing wrong. Here is not only me talking about MDC Triple C leaders selling out. Here is Margaret Longo, herself an MP, a former ZANU-PF MP, and an opposition leader in her own right, speaking on the same subject.
Politics is not a business. This is what I want to remind most of our MPs and other people.
Do you think they look at it as a business?
Yes, they look at it as a business. Because they look at it as a business seriously. Because the moment they go, business and employment creation, because if they go to parliament, you are employed. You get a car, you get a stable salary, and you are paid until your term is over. Already you are employed. If you are out, you're out of employment.
If you serve 2 terms, you get a pension?
He needs the talking points before he leaves, now.
Copilot, create talking points using this briefing.
My apologies.
They kill to be in parliament. This is why we have violence in this country. Because there is no employment. The only employment which is there is in politics. There is no other outside employment. So for them, a very good example is, look at what happened to CCC, the Triple C party. Have a look. When they lost, when they said they were rigged, what I expected from them, I expected all parliamentarians to say, we are not going to go to participate in a rigged system, and we are not going to sit in a rigged parliament, because the elections have been rigged. So all of us were not going to parliament. Imagine what could have happened. We could have gone into new elections. There's no way ZANU-PF was going to roll alone.
You think so?
Yes,
Do they care?
caring or not caring, the public would have forced them, because the majority of the people would want representation in parliament.
That is the point. We have had here a situation where the opposition, Nelson Chamisa and his colleagues, have been participating in flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, you are giving ZANU-PF legitimacy. But they've nonetheless soldiered on and participated out of greed. That is the point. What we need here is to get people like Nelson Chamisa to finally admit that they sold out. We want people like Nelson Chamisa to finally admit that he and his colleagues are ZANU-PF Team B in all but name, playing for Team A to win and playing for Team A to have political legitimacy. The people themselves have been naive, to say the least, because after 25 years of MDC Triple C on the political stage, and not even one token reform implemented, and leaders like Nelson Chamisa lying to them to call them to participate in flawed elections, the penny should have dropped by now that these people are shortchanging the nation. Nelson Chamisa is retained from the sabbatical. Yes, he has dropped the biblical verses. Yes, he has dropped the claim that he has been anointed by God. But he came back nonetheless for one purpose only: to call people to participate in flawed 2028 elections to give ZANU-PF legitimacy and perpetuate the dictatorship. That is what has happened here. That is what is happening here. I've said on this platform, and I'll say it again, if Nelson Chamisa had not conned millions of ordinary Zimbabweans to participate in 2023 elections, SADC and the AU, who had election observers and whose report on those elections was to condemn the process as flawed and illegal, they could not, however, take the next logical step i.e. denies ZANU-PF legitimacy because MDC or Triple C had participated in those flawed elections in their millions. If we can stop Chamisa conning millions of people, ordinary Zimbabweans, stop them participating in 2028 elections, I can rest assure you, SADC will have no excuse but to deny ZANU-PF political legitimacy. That is what is going to force meaningful change in Zimbabwe. It is undeniable folly that anyone would continue to participate in a flawed electoral process that is so flawed, so illegal, that the logical thing to do is to withdraw. Particularly when you know that if you participate, you give the process legitimacy. Zimbabwe has had 45 years of independence. And in those 45 years, we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. Shame. Shame on us. Yet it is true. The question now is, are we now smart enough to end this madness? The madness of participating in flawed elections to give the vote rigging ZANU-PF legitimacy and perpetuate our own suffering. Are we smart enough not to be so easily conned by lies from the likes of Chamisa, claiming that he has plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes? Hashtag God is in it. I am preparing my cabinet because God's plan does not fail. He was lying. And now he must admit that he lied to the people. And the people themselves must admit of their own weakness to be so easily conned, to have believed the idiotic lie and participated in a process only to perpetuate their own suffering. In 2028, the number one task is to stop Chamisa conning millions of Zimbabweans participating in those flawed elections. Because if they participate, they will perpetuate the dictatorship and the nation's suffering. Are we going to be conned by the Chamisa yet again? At least this time. This time, he's not pretending that he is the anointed one. He has finally abandoned the hashtag God is in it. Because In the past, history has shown that while he has claimed that God was in his plan, none of those plans ever came to pass. Proof that he was lying. Think about it. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.